The ticket sat in my pocket, crumpled and almost forgotten, until I saw the numbers on the screen. My heart stopped. Every digit matched. In that moment, I wasn't just a regular guy anymore. I was a millionaire. But instead of celebrating, instead of shouting the news to the world, I made a choice most people would call insane. I decided to keep it a secret. At first, I thought I was doing the right thing. Money changes people. I'd seen it happen before. I didn't want my family to treat me differently, or to start seeing dollar signs instead of me. I wanted to know if they would stand by me when I had nothing, not when I had millions. So I told no one. Not my parents. Not my siblings. Not even my closest friends. The world believed I was still the same man working a low-paying job, struggling to make ends meet. And I played that role perfectly. But soon, I wanted to test them, to see how much they really cared. I started small. I asked my brother Daniel if I could borrow a few $100s to cover my rent. He looked me dead in the eye and said, "Man, you've got to figure things out for yourself. I can't keep bailing you out." I hadn't asked him for anything in years. Still, I smiled, nodded, and walked away. Inside, though, I felt something crack. Next, I turned to my sister, Emily. She always bragged about how close we were, how family came first in her world. I asked her if I could stay at her place for a few weeks, just until I got back on my feet. She laughed. Actually laughed. "You're almost 40, she said. "Figure it out like the rest of us." The word stung. But I swallowed my pride and left her house with my secrets still buried. Then I went to my parents. Surely they would help. Parents always help, right? I sat across from them at the old kitchen table, staring at the wood grain that had been scratched and worn down over decades of family dinners. I told them I was struggling, that I felt lost, and I needed their support. My dad didn't look at me. He just shook his head and muttered, "We raised you better than this." My mom sighed and said softly, "We can't keep carrying you, honey. You're on your own now." That night, I went back to my tiny apartment and sat in the dark. The check from the lottery commission was tucked safely in a drawer, untouched. Tens of millions of dollars with my name on it. And yet, I had never felt so abandoned, so worthless. It wasn't about the money. It was about loyalty, about love. And the truth was brutal. When I needed them the most, no one came through. But the story didn't end there. Because the deeper I sank into my secret, the more twisted things became. The next week, I pushed the test further. I told my family I had lost my job. I let them see me wearing old clothes, skipping meals, pretending I had nothing left. Their reaction shocked me. My brother mocked me, saying I was lazy. My sister avoided my calls. My parents stopped inviting me over for dinner. I had never felt more like a stranger in my own bloodline. And here's where the irony burned. I could have bought them all houses, paid off their debts, given them lives beyond their wildest dreams. But instead, they chose to abandon me when they thought I had nothing. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and write in the comments which country you're watching this video from. Enjoy the story. Sitting there in my empty apartment, surrounded by silence, I finally understood something chilling. Money doesn't just reveal people, it exposes them. And my family had shown me exactly who they were. The real question was, what would I do with that knowledge? I thought things couldn't get worse after watching my own family turn their backs on me. But I was wrong. Much worse was waiting, and it began the moment I stepped into the shadows of my own secret. The lottery money sat untouched, locked away in a private account. Every time I looked at the numbers on the screen, I felt both powerful and hollow. I had everything, yet nothing. My family believed I was broke, jobless, and barely surviving. And as days passed, their true faces grew clear. Daniel, my brother, was the first to show his greed. One night, he called me unexpectedly. His voice was casual, but there was a sharpness underneath. "So, are you still struggling?" he asked. I told him the truth they all believed, that I was barely scraping by. He chuckled. "Well, I just got promoted. 6 figures now. Maybe you should take notes from me instead of whining." I didn't respond. But as I held the phone, I wondered what he would say if he knew I could buy his entire company with a single check. Emily wasn't any better. She posted pictures online of expensive vacations, luxury shopping trips, and perfect dinners with friends. Every caption dripped with fake wisdom about family first. Yet she hadn't called me in weeks. When I texted her once, asking if we could talk, she left me on read. The silence told me everything. But it was my parents who cut the deepest. I stopped by their house unannounced one evening. My mother opened the door and frowned, as if I were a burden. My father didn't even get up from his chair. I told him I'd lost everything, that I didn't know how to start over. My mom's eyes softened for a second, but then she said, "We don't have room for you here. You need to stand on your own." I left their house that night with a storm inside me. My family, the people who were supposed to stand by me when the world collapsed, had abandoned me. But then something unexpected happened. A stranger showed me more kindness than my own blood ever had. Her name was Rachel. She lived in the apartment down the hall. She was a single mom, working 2 jobs, barely surviving. One evening, she knocked on my door, holding a small plate of food. "I had extra," she said softly. "Thought you might want some." That moment shook me. She had nothing, yet she shared what little she had. I started spending time with her and her young son, Josh. They laughed, they welcomed me, they treated me like I mattered. And for the first time since winning the lottery, I felt human again. But it also made me realize something terrifying. Maybe I was hiding my fortune from the wrong people. Because while my family had failed me, Rachel showed me the one thing they couldn't: compassion. Still, I couldn't reveal my secret yet. Not to her, not to anyone. The money was both a blessing and a curse. I wanted to test just how far my family's betrayal would go. So I pushed the game even further. I told them I was being evicted, that I had no food, that I might end up on the streets. Their responses were colder than ice. Daniel told me to stop being dramatic. Emily blocked my number. My parents said, "We'll pray for you," but nothing more. The truth burned inside me like fire. I had millions. I could have lifted all of them into comfort. But they chose to let me drown when they thought I was poor. And that's when a darker idea started forming in my mind. If money exposes people, maybe it was time to use it as a weapon. Not to help them, but to show them what they had lost. Because I was no longer just a man with a secret. I was a man with power. And soon, they would learn what betrayal truly costs. The idea grew in my mind like a shadow, stretching longer every day. If my family wanted nothing to do with me when I was broke, then I'd show them exactly what they had thrown away. The first move was small, quiet, invisible. I bought the building where Rachel and I lived. It cost more than I had ever imagined spending, but for me now, it was only a fraction of my fortune. The landlord signed the papers, shaking my hand with a smile, never realizing the new owner was the same man who neighbors thought was struggling to pay rent. Rachel had no idea either. When the landlord left, she came by with a worried look. "They raised the rent again," she sighed. "I don't know how much longer I can stay here." I wanted to tell her right then, but I kept silent. Instead, a week later, she received a letter. "Due to special considerations, your rent has been permanently reduced." She cried tears of relief, hugging her son. She didn't know it was me, but I didn't need the credit. Just seeing her safe was enough. But when it came to my family, my plans were darker. One evening, Daniel hosted a lavish party to celebrate his new promotion. I attended quietly, keeping my mask of poverty in place. He barely acknowledged me, but his friends mocked me openly. "Isn't that your brother? The broke one?" One of them whispered loud enough for me to hear. I smiled. They didn't know that the wine they were sipping, the house they were admiring, was bought with a silent loan I had arranged through an investment company. Without my money, Daniel's dream house wouldn't even exist. The irony burned like fire. Emily's turn came next. She bragged online about joining an exclusive fitness club, flaunting photos by the pool. She had no idea that I had quietly bought a majority stake in the very chain she belonged to. I watched from the shadows as she lived her glamorous life, not realizing her brother, the one she had blocked, was the man making her lifestyle possible. But here's where things took an unexpected turn. Rachel started noticing things about me. Little details I thought I had hidden. My clothes looked new, even though I pretended they were old. My phone wasn't the cheap one I claimed. It was the latest model. And when I casually helped her son with school supplies, she looked at me differently. One night, she asked softly, Are you really as broke as you say? The question froze me. For a moment, I almost confessed everything. But then I shook my head and forced a tired smile. I'm just good at finding deals. She didn't push further, but the suspicion lingered in her eyes. Meanwhile, my family's greed was spiraling. Daniel called, pretending to check on me, but quickly shifted the conversation to himself. I'm thinking of investing in a new company, he said. If only I had someone to back me up with a little loan. Emily, too, suddenly reached out. She invited me to lunch after months of silence, showering me with fake warmth. Family sticks together, she said, her smile too wide, her voice too sweet. I saw through it all. They didn't miss me. They smelled opportunity. And that's when I made a decision. I would reveal my secret, but not in the way they expected. Not with hugs and gifts and forgiveness. No, I would do it in a way that showed them exactly how small their loyalty was compared to the fortune they could have had. Because money doesn't change people. It reveals them. And my family had already revealed the worst of themselves. The game was no longer about survival. It was about power. And I was just getting started. The longer I kept the secret, the heavier it became. My fortune was no longer just money sitting in a bank. It was a weapon. And like any weapon, it demanded to be used. Daniel's greed gave me the perfect opening. He called again, this time with more urgency. Look, I know things haven't been easy for you, he began, his voice dripping with false sympathy. But I'm working on something big. An investment that could change everything for our family. I just need someone to believe in me. I could almost hear the desperation in his tone. He had no idea that I already owned half the company he was trying to invest in. Without me, his big opportunity didn't exist. I wish I could help, I said quietly, playing the role of the struggling brother. But I barely have enough for myself. His silence on the other end of the line told me everything. In his mind, I was useless, disposable. Emily wasn't much better. She started sending me friendly texts, inviting me to events, posting photos of us together as if we'd always been close. At first, I ignored her, but then I realized something. Her desperation wasn't just social. She was broke. Behind the flashy posts, she was drowning in debt. And without knowing it, she was begging money from the very man who had already saved her lifestyle. That night, sitting alone in my apartment, I stared at the lottery ticket framed on my wall. It wasn't the paper that mattered anymore. It was the truth behind it. A truth I had hidden from everyone. But Rachel was getting harder to fool. She started asking sharper questions. Why do you always have cash when you need it? How did you afford that watch? Why do you never seem worried about bills? I brushed her off with excuses, but I could see it in her eyes. She knew something was wrong. Or maybe something was right, and I just wasn't telling her. Her trust mattered to me in a way my family's never did. And that made the lie feel heavier. But before I could decide whether to tell her, fate forced my hand. Daniel called again, but this time his voice wasn't confident or fake. It was broken. I need you, he whispered. Everything's falling apart. The company deal collapsed, the house is on the line, and I don't know what to do. For a moment, I almost pitied him. But then I remembered the laughter at his party, the whispers about me being a failure. He had enjoyed watching me struggle. And now it was my turn. I'm sorry, I said softly. I wish I could help. I hung up before he could reply. The next day, Emily showed up at my door. Not a call. Not a text. She was standing there, her makeup streaked from crying. Please, she begged. I don't know who else to turn to. I'm drowning. It was surreal. My own sister, the one who had blocked me when I needed her most, now begging at my doorstep. And just as she spoke, Rachel walked in. She froze at the sight of Emily, then turned to me with a sharp, suspicious gaze. What's going on here? She asked. For a second, the room felt like it was spinning. My sister begging. Rachel demanding the truth. My secret pressing against the walls, ready to burst out. I realized then that I couldn't keep this up much longer. The lies were cracking. The tension was snapping. And the perfect opportunity had arrived. I would gather them all, Daniel, Emily, even Rachel, and I would reveal everything in one final, unforgettable moment. But they wouldn't just hear the truth. They would feel it. The night of the reveal, I didn't sleep. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, rehearsing the words in my head. For months, I had been hiding my secret, twisting the knife slowly in the people who had once abandoned me. But now the time had come. They would finally see who I really was. I chose the setting carefully, a quiet, upscale restaurant downtown. A private room with dim lighting and a long oak table, polished so brightly it reflected every face that leaned over it. I called Daniel, Emily, and Rachel, telling each of them that I had something important to share. They all came, though none of them knew why. Daniel arrived first, wearing a wrinkled suit that couldn't disguise the cracks in his confidence. His eyes darted around the room, restless, desperate. Emily followed soon after, overdressed as always, but the dark circles under her eyes betrayed her exhaustion. And then came Rachel, calm and graceful, though I could see the storm brewing inside her. She wasn't here just for answers, she was here for the truth. We sat in silence at first. The air was heavy, like a storm about to break. Finally, Daniel spoke. "So, what's this about? You sounded serious." I leaned back in my chair, studying their faces. "It is serious," I said. "In fact, it's about everything." They exchanged confused glances, and Emily nervously laughed. "You're being dramatic." "What's going on?" I reached into my jacket and pulled out the framed lottery ticket, the one I had stared at for months, the one that had changed everything. I set it down on the table with a soft thud. "This," I said quietly, "is what I've been hiding." For a moment, no one reacted. Their eyes moved from the ticket to me, as if waiting for a punchline. Daniel blinked first. That's not real." "Is it?" "It's very real," I replied. "Hundreds of millions, sitting in accounts you'll never touch. Money I won. Money I chose not to share." Emily's jaw dropped, her lips trembling. "You mean all this time? While we thought you were broke? While you—" I cut her off. "While you laughed at me. While you turned your backs. While you told me I was worthless." The room fell silent. The weight of my words sank into them, pinning them down. Daniel leaned forward, his voice cracking. "But why? Why didn't you tell us?" "Because I needed to know," I said, my tone sharper now. "I needed to see who you really were when I had nothing. And you showed me. You showed me greed, pride, and cruelty. You only came to me when you wanted something. Never before." Emily's eyes filled with tears. "But we're family." "Family doesn't abandon family," I snapped. "Family doesn't laugh when one of them is struggling. You don't get to use that word now, not when it's convenient." Rachel hadn't spoken yet. She just sat there, staring at me, her expression unreadable. Finally, she whispered, "So everything I suspected, it was true." I turned to her, softer now. "Yes, and you're the only one who never tried to take from me. You asked questions, not for money, but for honesty. That's why I'm telling you this tonight. You deserve to know." Her eyes glistened, but she stayed silent. Daniel slammed his fist on the table. "You can't just hoard all that money while we're drowning. You owe us." "I owe you nothing," I said, standing now. My voice was steady, final. "I earned this. I endured the loneliness, the rejection, the betrayal. This wealth isn't just money, it's a reminder. A reminder of who stood with me and who didn't." Emily reached for me, but I pulled back. Daniel shouted something, but I didn't hear it. My focus was on Rachel, the only one whose opinion mattered. I picked up the ticket, slid it back into my jacket, and walked toward the door. Before leaving, I turned to them one last time. I wanted support. I wanted love. You gave me neither. And now you've lost the right to both. I left them sitting there, shocked, broken, and speechless. As I stepped into the night air, I felt lighter than I had in months. The secret was no longer a burden. It was freedom. And though my family had lost me forever, I had gained something greater, the power to decide my own worth. Because sometimes the cruelest revenge isn't taking away from others, it's showing them what they could have had and leaving them to live with it.